would you believe me if I told you that some of the most exciting, creative, and memorable boss fights of the past decade just dropped a few weeks ago, and nobody's talking about them? I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that I place these boss encounters up on the same pedestal, alongside the tragedy of the cogwork dancers in Silksong, the spectacle of Radahn and his festival in Elden Ring, and the big mean house that'll gobble you up in Final Fantasy VII Remake. And if I had to guess, I'd say that the reason nobody's really talking about these new incredible boss fights is because they're locked away behind the recently released Switch 2 DLC for 2023's Super Mario Bros. Wonder. So yeah, kinda understandable why they're not in the spotlight, but the fact remains that these encounters are expertly designed bangers that deserve to be experienced. Mario Wonder is a bit of an odd game for me personally. Don't get me wrong, I love it immensely. It's probably my favorite 2D Mario in over 30 years, which couldn't possibly be true, but I keep looking at this list and yeah, I think Wonder is the best since Yoshi's Island. But the main reason it's a strange one for me is purely based on timing. The game dropped at the end of October 2023, just a few days before the subsequent drop of all of us here leaving the Escapists and starting up Second Wind. So, it's understandable that my mind was a bit scattered when I first played the game back then. Which is why I was excited for the Switch 2 update that was released last month, as it provided a nice excuse to jump back in and replay the game under less, life-altering circumstances. But, leading up to this, my impression was that the Meetup and Bellabel Park DLC that was added to this new version of Wonder focused mostly on various multiplayer stages and minigames, which are neat but didn't really move the needle for me personally, and while that is mostly true, it's not the only thing that's been added to the game. In each region of the Flower Kingdom, you'll find a new area called a Brigade Tent, and it's here that you'll enter a remixed version of a familiar stage that's infused with a creative Wonder Flower effect and culminates in a boss fight against one of the 7 Koopalings, also under the effect of said Wonder Flower. And while this sounds like nearly every single Mario boss stage since the SNES, it's the way in which Nintendo takes a creative kitchen sink approach that makes each one of these encounters so damn memorable. Take a look at Larry, who gains the ability to flood the stage with crystal blocks that need to be smashed from above, below, or from the side in order to press on, all while avoiding or utilizing the Bomberman-esque explosives that fire off in the 4 cardinal directions. This culminates in the battle itself, where you'll need to quickly plan your smashing route in order to attack the Koopa from the correct angle. Or there's Morton, who transforms into a giant marionette puppet controlled by a pair of Lakitu in the foreground who are literally pulling his strings. This makes for a creative display of obstacle timing, as you can prepare for his earth-rattling ground pounds by keeping an eye on the enemies controlling him. It's also a nice reminder that the Mario franchise has had theatrical roots for decades, back with Mario 2's character selection screen and Mario 3's entire framing. Each of the 7 Koopalings have their own flavor of challenge, complete with both a platforming gauntlet as well as the boss fight themselves. Wendy transforms herself and every foe into a deadly fish, Roy turns into a ghost and bombards you from a haunted pirate ship, and Iggy creates a bouncing hell filled with hundreds of piranha plants. 7 new bosses, and each one is a banger. Sure, they may not require the same technical mastery of a Silksong or Elden Ring boss, evidenced by the fact that I was able to make it through each Koopa Kid in a single life, but each boss provided a unique and memorable challenge that has left a lasting impression on me. Sidebar, while writing this script, I realized that I was using the word boss a whole hell of a lot and tried to come up with some other terms to keep things fresh. But when I went fishing for suggestions in our company Slack, we all came to the realization that there are really no other terms for these end-of-stage fights in our gaming lexicon. Items can be called power-ups, abilities, collectibles, equipment, boons, etc. Levels are often referred to as stages, zones, biomes, areas, maps, boards, and whatnot. But bosses, they're just bosses. Unless you're Kojima, in which case your boss isn't a boss, but rather Big Boss.
Kept you waiting, huh?
Okay, back on track. The quality of these encounters shouldn't really come as a surprise. For the better part of 40 years, Nintendo, and especially the Mario franchise, has produced some of the most creative, challenging, and rewarding fights our medium has to offer. The final showdown with Bowser in Mario 3, the variety of encounters with the Koopa Kids in World, the way Yoshi's Island supersizes a familiar foe and tosses you in a wonderfully unique and creative arena with them, embracing all 3 dimensions in Mario 64, and pretty much every single boss in Galaxy. Hell, the entirety of Bowser's Fury is built around cyclical fights against the titular Furious Bowser. And that's not even touching the legendary encounters throughout other Nintendo franchises like Zelda and Metroid. Though I do want to shout out my favorite house-style boss in Nintendo's bag of tricks, a big ol' floating head with 2 chunky mitts that you have to figure out how to take down. Seriously, several Star Fox, Kirby, Donkey Kong, Zelda, and Mario games feature fights against this exact archetype, including the final boss of Wonder itself. And that's just Nintendo-developed games. If we dipped into JRPGs, we could probably come up with a list of several dozen bosses that boil down to a big ol' head and a couple of detached hands. So, there you go. Upcoming Patreon video. Top 50, whatever the hell these guys are in gaming history. Zooming out a bit, the Switch 2 upgrade DLCs remain difficult for me to grade, especially when folks ask, is it worth the extra price if I already own the game? On their own, these first-party Nintendo games like Kirby, Zelda, and Mario still whip just as much ass as they did at launch. Now, are their additions worth the extra $5, $10, or $20? I don't know. That's tough to say. And I also don't want to presume to know your own personal budgets, time to price sweet spots, eagerness for replays, or limits when it comes to hobbies like gaming. At the end of the day, I'm just here to tell you that dodging Ludwig's lightning gave me as much joy as sparring with Scylla and the Sirens in Hades 2, so do with that information what you will.